Have you ever just been like, oi, one of my core strengths in digital art lies in the line art, but you know what, flip that, I'm just gonna do one without. Yeah, so typically I paint over a lot of my line art throughout my process either way, so what's the big deal then? Well, I'm very dependent on my line art, even if I end up covering up most of it during the rendering process, but at least I have it there to guide me. Well, not today, apparently, because I decided to skip the line art step for this piece as part of a random challenge I came up with in my head. Because I thought it would be fun. Okay, honestly though, it was fun, but it also took all of my brain power for the rest of the month, probably. But there was one more aspect to this challenge, and that is limited brushes. I recently got the Probrush Z 2.0 brush set consisting of 62 brushes. I got these in return for this video where I could do whatever I wanted with them. I went over and tested all of them and moved my favorite 13 up under my little favorite brush folder in Photoshop. I already used the chain brush in several of my illustrations already and I love it. This one in particular, number 20, must be my favorite of them all. It can be used for sketching, for shading, and for blending as well. So for this challenge, I did allow myself to use my own blender brush, which is part of my own free brush set. Besides that, I am only allowed to use the brushes from the Probrush Z 2.0 brush set. If you fall in love with these brushes, you can buy them using the link in the video's description. The link is an affiliate link, which means that when you buy or if you buy a brush set, a partition of that earnings goes to me. So that way you'll be supporting my work as well. I'll talk more about my favorite brushes as we work our way through this challenge. So let's jump right into it, shall we? First, I sketched out my drawing. I'm allowed to do this, but I can't use it in the drawing. I need to hide it or remove the layer entirely once I'm finished. I used my favorite brush number 20 to sketch out today's main protagonist, Princess Zelda from Breath of the Wild, in her winter outfit. Next step is color blocking. I placed the sketch layer on top and used the lasso tool to manually make the selections I wanted to color in. The initial colors I used were just placeholder colors until I was done sectioning out the princess. The different colors indicate the different selections, by the way. When I'm done making selections, it's time to apply the real base colors. In Photoshop, that is fairly easy. You simply double click on the layer you want to change the color of and select the layer style called Color Overlay. Not to be confused with the overlay blending mode on the layer. It's not the same. Color Overlay only refers to overlaying the entire layer with a color. Once I've added the correct color, I rasterize the layer by right-clicking and choosing Rasterize Layer. It's just a way to make the color overlay effect permanent and no longer just a layer effect, so that the overlay is now in fact a part of the pixels on the layer. Then I went and got some color thumbnails I made previously for a different piece featuring Link, coincidence much. I already knew I wanted to use the winter palette I made over here because I didn't use it for my original illustration, so I just started color picking and loosely coloring in the background using brush number 25, which has a nice rock texture to it. Brush number 48 is a pine tree brush, which was a perfect fit for my background here, so I just dabbed in some pine trees, easy peasy. Then I went back into the lasso tool and made some more details on the princess. And here's a little preview of how the illustration looks right now when I hide the sketch layer. It looks like a fancy vector art illustration or something. Now it's time to do the shading. This is the process that is going to change everything. For this step, starting with the skin, I alpha locked the skin layer so I could only draw inside the pixels that are already there. It's kind of like a clipping mask, but without an extra layer. I also lowered the opacity of my sketch to only 10% so it's just barely visible. I then used my sketch layer as my guide for the shading. I mainly used brush number 20 for this step. But I also occasionally use the lasso tool and the airbrush to section out and divide the shading into shadow and light. like I do with the chin here, but also while painting the nose. Besides the Probrush Z brush set that I'm only allowed to use, I could also in addition use my own blender brush for my own brush set, and I found that it worked really good with the more textured brushes that I got from the Probrush Z brush set. That sounds really fun, say that really fast 10 times. After the skin was partially done, I moved on to the hair. Again, I am using brush number 20 because I love the texture in it, to lightly brush out the different shades in the hair. I also experimented with some finer brushes, amongst them brush number 29, to make smaller details at the front of her hair. The key, in my case at least, to drawing hair without line art is to make details appear within the flats of the hair, like overlapping hair and variation in color. I decided that the braid was too much of a pain right now, chickening out here, so I temporarily moved on with something else. Using the airbrush, I laid down the first shadows on the fur of her coat. I then used brush number 15 and number 16 to create color variations into the fur. These two brushes are so fun to work with. They create almost a spatter of color in different variation colors, which all falls in harmony with the color that you have selected. I hope that makes sense. It just saves me a lot of time from having to come up with a lot of variations myself for the fur. And on the coat, I mainly used a mix of my blender brush and brush number 20 again. To add the overall shadows to these illustrations, I decided to go with one overall or main shadow layer. I used a gradient going from a pinkish color to a purple one and set the layer to multiply. I like to use gradients for shadow layers because it gives you some variation in your shadow colors. See this little extra picture here? This is just a layer mask. It means that the multiply layer only affects whatever is represented as white in this thumbnail here. What is represented as black doesn't get anything from the multiply layer at all. If you want to learn how to master layer masks, I have an entire tutorial on it. The link will of course be in the description. As an addition, I added a lightning layer set to overlay with some sunlight coming from the top right in the illustration. From there, I used the mask on the shadow layer to control where the shadow would fall by painting in the light. What that means in human language is that since the white in the mask represents where the shadow layer affects the princess, I can simply paint in with black to erase the shadow effect from certain areas. And I did exactly that, mainly using the airbrush. I temporarily turned off the shadow and highlight layer so I could return and finish the shading on the character's hair. Ugh, the braid. I'm really not a fan of drawing braids, but I think it turned out so-so. I mainly used the lasso tool on the airbrush to paint it, and then brush number 20 for the details. So now I'm adding a bit more shading and painting in the last details so we can move on with the light and shadow layers. After doing some color and contrast adjustments, I added several shadow and highlight layers. I just wanted more color variation in my illustration. Don't be confused by the fact that I have multiple shadow layers. They're just layering on top of each other, giving a different effect. Then on a new top layer, only below my main highlight layer, I started rendering. I used the selections I already made when I colored the flats in to limit myself from drawing in unwanted places, even though that I'm right now working on one single layer for the rest of the details. Did I mention that painting hair is one of the most zen things I can do for myself? I added some more snow to the background to add in some more lightness, and on a new layer I painted some blue color of the sky onto the princess with a soft airbrush. I did so because she is definitely going to pick up some sky color on her silhouette. Then I added some snow with motion blur, and then I also blurred out bottom of the princess to center the attention more towards her face. And lastly, I made some very small detailed corrections. And here is the sketch we started with, which is by the way now taken out completely of the drawing. And here is the final result. It was really a pleasure to work with these brushes from Probrush Z. They're all for Photoshop, and remember to use the affiliate link if you consider buying them for yourself. They're sold at a discount at the time of publishing this video, so you can get them for around $20. I can definitely recommend these brushes. I don't use all 62 of them. I handpicked my favorite 13 ones, which you can see right here, but it's up to you to find your own favorites. My brushes are also available, you can get them for free, just follow the link in the description. My brushes though are way more basic and not as cool as those from Probrush Z. But the blender in my brush set is like magic. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want to support my work and get more videos in the future, like this video so I can beat the YouTube algorithm. Comment for super ultimate support and share this video for super ultra mega cool ring-a-ling ding dong support of my work. Until next time, guys, take care. Bye!